Like most coral reefs around the world, the Florida Reef Tract has declined over the past few decades. Fishing pressures, pollution, development, and climate change have all left their mark. Now, a new disease may be the last nail in the coffin. While studying the underwater topography, Brian discovered nearly 300 giant boulder corals that are over 6 feet in diameter, estimated to be up to 300 years old.
About half of them are dead, and we don't know when they died. Could have been previous stress events, could have been early in the century or just a few years ago.
To avoid losing the remaining living boulder corals to stony coral tissue loss disease, Brian and his team switched their focus to monitoring and treating the infected corals.
Once a coral gets sick from the disease transmission, the progress continues until the entire coral is dead. There's been some evidence in the field that the disease may slow down at times, but for the majority, it appears that once a coral gets sick, the entire colony is going to be lost.
Aaron's transmission studies are also helping to identify genotypes of corals that appear to be resistant to the disease. This information is valuable to Mote Marine Laboratory and other organizations that are restoring corals on the reef.
Now this is the perfect chip right here.
One person involved in restoration efforts is Ken Niedermeyer. He began growing corals in the wild in 2002 and later founded the Coral Restoration Foundation.
Years ago, I set out to show people that we could grow and raise corals offshore and regrow them and plant them on the coral reefs. We went from one coral to tens of thousands of corals.
Corals are unique in their ability to reproduce sexually by spawning and asexually through fragmentation. The Coral Restoration Foundation uses the fragmentation process by trimming a piece of coral into smaller fragments.
We then glue that little piece of coral onto a card that we had previously printed that had the genus and species and the particular genotype or number that we'd assigned to it.
Each card is placed on a coral restoration tree to grow in their offshore nurseries. Once they reach a certain size, corals of identical genotypes are outplanted in clusters onto the reef, where they will eventually fuse together to create new colonies.
So one single colony that's, the size of half a basketball could start to sexually reproduce in 2 years. That same colony would take 15 years to grow from a baby. We're trying to step up the whole process. The goal is to get these things breeding again.
The cornerstone of our restoration program is preserving and maintaining and outplanting genetic diversity, with the idea being that we want to mimic as much natural diversity that was on the reef 40 years ago. One genotype might be resistant to coral bleaching, to high heat temperatures. One genotype might be more resistant to disease. So we want to make sure that we're sort of trying to hit every single possibility that the climate could throw at us, in hoping that once these outplanted populations sexually reproduce and spawn, they will form new genotypes, and those new genotypes will be more resilient, more resistant to future changes in the climate.